Welcome back. This is the part 2 of the two-part series on risk management per ISO 14971. Let's dive into the second part. The question you might ask, how do you apply mitigation? How do you apply the mitigation controls? Are there any techniques or methodologies? Yes. This design right here may look very nice. It has critical features, all dimensions. The design looks nice, but how do you know that it is safe to use now? And that's where the control techniques come into play. Let's take a look. Here, the mitigation must be built from the ground up. That's the bottom line. The mitigation must be built from the ground up. As an engineer and designer, the first goal is to design the danger out of existence. And that means safety by design. We need to eliminate the hazard or reduce the probability of that hazard as low as possible, as far as possible. Because as you can see, the increasing risk of human factor increases this way as you go up from the ground up. The second layer of protection after the safety by design are the protective measures such as alarms, guards, manufacturing safety features. They both can go hand in hand, but there's the second layer of safety features. Alarm and guards cannot replace safety by design. And the last and the least form of safety feature is information for safety. Warnings on labels, instructions for use, training, those are all important. Information for safety is important. However, that doesn't replace protective measures. And of course, that does not replace safety by design. So the first layer of protection is safety by design. Second layer is protective measures. Third layer of controls would be information for safety. And that's the hierarchy of controls. This is what it looks like when we apply the safety features or the controls. You identify the hazard, and then you build safety within the design. And therefore, you already reduced the likelihood of that hazard. And the second layer of safety is your protective measures, the controls. You are adding more controls, such as alarms and guards. Thereby, you are further reducing the risk of that hazard. Reduce, risk reduced. And finally, at the very end, you have information for safety. However, that cannot replace any of those two. Warnings do not fix bad design. The regulatory path requires using structural controls in this way, safety by design and then protective measures, followed by information for safety. Then we have to have a way to verify the controls in place. We have 3 different controls: design, protective features, and information for safety. First, we have to confirm that the implementation is there. That for design, there is an output. This is the CAD model or drawing showing the features. In this case, let's say physical interlock feature. For the second layer of protection, protective features, let's say we have an alarm that's triggered by the software. So you have to verify that the code is there. Implementation. And also for the labels, warning labels, we have to confirm that there is a process to confirm that, like the bill of materials that lists the labels to be printed. And then finally, we have to verify that they all work. And this is how we do that in the effectiveness verification phase. Does it really work? So does the design, the CAD model, the interlock feature that we have to have a way to verify that the interlock feature actually works. We have to define the acceptance criteria, pass criteria, fail criteria, and we have to prove that it works. For the alarm, the same thing. We have to confirm that the alarm works. The second layer of protective features actually work. And finally, for the labels, we have to confirm the actual labels meet all the requirements, regulatory requirements, and usability requirements. Because a control that cannot be verified cannot be claimed, right? Risk management is only complete when both implementation and the effectiveness are proven. After you have applied all the risk control measures, safety by design, alarm, and information for safety, and evaluated them for their effectiveness, you have to step back and ask yourself, are there any residual risks remaining? If there are still risks remaining, then you can use a risk control decision logic like this to analyze that and apply controls. The same control hierarchy that we talked about, same way, safety by design, alarm, followed by label. You have to verify those again to ensure that no new hazards have been created and your safety features are actually working as intended before proceeding to the next level. But what happens if you have everything, if you have done everything, you engineered it as safely as possible, still some residual risks remain? That's when you perform the benefit risk analysis with subject matter experts and available data to quantify the benefits versus risks. And you compile everything into a risk management report that we'll review next. Now we come to the final stage of the risk management process, which is the risk management report. What I'm showing you here on the right side of the screen is a risk management report, RMR. On the left side, what we showed you, we talked about earlier, risk management plan. So now is the time to do a risk management report. Why am I showing you both? Because your report has to comply with the plan. In the plan, you promised what it is that you are going to do, and the report you are showing that you have done all that, okay? And so it goes through the same process. This is a template, purpose, scope. You can reference some documents, like in this case, I use FMEA, so I can for risk analysis. So I can reference that FMEA, design history file. Review of risk management activities, what we did based on what we promised earlier. In the plan, we said we'll have a risk management report that will summarize everything, that will capture all activities from the plan, and that's what it is on the right side, risk management report. Summary of risk analysis, in this case, is the FMEA activities that we have performed. So summarize that here. And you can also have statistics right here if you want, displaying how many unacceptable that you had, how many you had to mitigate, what type of mitigations you had to put in there, how many verification and validation that you had to perform. All those activities you can summarize here if you want. That's an option. Or you can just take the audience to where it is, like the risk analysis document FMEA, if you did everything right there. Okay, so there are different ways to do this. Risk control and verification. It should show that you designed it with safety in mind. Okay, a safe design and construction. Measures, control measures were put in place. Manufacturing, including manufacturing. Information for safety labels. So the three things that we talked about, all three measurements were taken in place or put in place. Final evaluation of residual risks. So if you had any risks left, what did you do with those? So you conclude right here, you put a summary of what it is that you have done with the residual risks. Okay. Based on the FMEA results, all individual residual risks are categorized as acceptable or ALARP with justification that we discussed earlier. As low as reasonably practicable. That's the statement or the wording that they use, okay, in that standard. And then overall residual risk evaluation. After you evaluated that, what is the end product? What did you conclude at the very end? So overall, the risk has to be acceptable, right? The risks associated with the device's use are outweighed by the clinical benefits to the patient. So if there is any risk left, the benefits outweigh the risk. That's what it means. The overall residual risk is then acceptable. Okay. In this particular case, you have to prove everything in order to make that statement. And the post-production monitoring, so you have to have a system in place because now you're providing a report at the end of the design and development, launching the product to the market. During this phase, you are releasing this report. However, you're not done yet, right? The post-production activities need to be performed, and so you have a system in place. What type of system? Do you have a procedure in place that monitors for post-production activities? So you discuss this right here. The system will ensure that the risk management process remains active and that any new hazards or changes in the state of the art are incorporated into future risk assessments. So you have a process in place that will take care of that. And then you will probably review that during your management review or any other times as needed. Of course, complaints review, that's a different discussion, but I'm just giving you some ideas. And finally, there has to be a conclusion. So what is the conclusion? Is it complete? Then conclude, the risk management process is considered complete for this phase and the device is safe for its intended use. And both risk management plan and the risk management report needs to be approved. The final step, the last step in the loop, is the post-production monitoring. What that means is risk management is a continuous process. Once you ship the product, project is completed, post-production monitoring starts. So you have to have a system in place, and you collect data from 4 different sources during post-production monitoring. First one is production process, your own production process, or whatever you are doing the manufacturing. Second is the user feedback and complaints system that you have, data collection from that system. Third is the service reports, information coming, data coming from the service reports. And the fourth is scientific literature and public data, like the MOD database, data collecting from those sources and resources that feeds into the central post-production monitoring system. So that brings us to the loop that we just talked about earlier. The risk management is a continuous loop. It's a closed loop system. You start with risk identification and risk analysis during the product development that goes through the continuous process of risk evaluation, risk controls, risk report, and then the product is in the market. Now you are under post-production monitoring. You are collecting data from the market, and any data that you receive goes back into the loop. Do you remember this that we discussed earlier? Multiple loops. It goes back into the risk analysis and goes through the process. This was the risk management fundamental course. If you want a summary or have questions, please see the description below. Until next time, take care.